Hello, everyone. My next guest is Madi Coffman, and she was crowned Miss South Carolina Volunteer in July of last year. Wow, that's almost a year, and has spent her time advocating for her S.E.R.V.E Initiative, the Love Thy Neighbor initiative, which focuses on education and kindness despite differences in beliefs or backgrounds. Maddie's work with the platform has led her to work closely with South Carolina Pride and another local nonprofit, Positive Opportunities for Pageant Preparation, POPP. She will compete for the title of Miss Volunteer America in June, more specifically in less than 2 weeks' time. Having competed in Miss South Carolina and Miss South Carolina USA over the past 6 years, she has received preliminary fitness and evening gown awards, 4 top 10 placements, as well as 2 overall interview wins. A 2022 graduate of the University of South Carolina, she graduated magna cum laude with her Bachelor's of Arts in Elementary Education. She now teaches 3rd grade in Blythewood, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, SC, and loves being able to make an impact on the next generation of leaders. At her school, she leads a girls' mentorship group called Lead Hers, which focuses on empowering the 40 girls in the program with leadership skills, self-confidence, and helping them make friends. Maddie credits pageantry with teaching her the life skills necessary to be successful and empowering her to be involved in her community. Well, Maddie, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited for this. I was talking to Bailey Joy today and she was like, it was so much fun. We had such a great conversation. So I'm all set. I can't wait.
What is Bailey as like zany and like lovable at first sight as I think she is? She's just like a little ray of sunshine.
Yep. So when we went to teen, she and I roomed together. And so we were in we one of the nights we were in bed just like giggling. Like we just could not stop laughing, could not stop chatting. We just had so much fun. She would just random things would happen to her and she would just go places and things would happen and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened to me." And she's just one of those quirky, one of a kind people that I've never met anyone like in my life.
Because I mean, having talked to her now, she may not have been here if things had turned out slightly differently, and that's quite a striking thought. But I mean, that's Bailey. If you haven't seen Bailey's interview, I highly suggest guys go and watch Bailey's interview. But we're here to talk about you. So, Maddie, that's a lot. A lot of the Miss Volunteer America, when I read out the bio, I'm here for about 10 minutes reading through everything. That's not quite as bad as Haley's, but it's close enough. So, given that very impressive resume, obviously, why don't we backtrack? And with that resume, why did you decide to go into pageantry to begin with?
So yeah, I could have made my resume a lot longer, and I was like, keep it short, keep it sweet. We can talk about the details. So, but I got into pageants because my mom competed in pageants when she was about in high school. She did like her school pageant, she did local pageants like that. And then I decided in 7th grade that I wanted to do my school pageant for the first time. And at the time, my dad was dating my now stepdad, and he was like, "Oh, did you know that he used to help his sister with pageants? Like that was their thing that they did." And so I ended up doing them with him instead of with my mom, and they really pushed me once I got into it to keep going and keep exploring it and seeing what would happen. So I wasn't very good at them at first. It I talk a lot about it took me lots and lots and lots and lots of tries to get to the point that I'm at. That was 7th grade, so that was 13 years ago. But they really pushed me to take it further, take it more seriously, and then they inspired my platform and all of the work that I do now.
You tell me what a school pageant is like, because we don't have anything like that here in Australia, and I don't know how usual that is for where you're at. But in Australia, people just don't know about pageants in general. So to hear that there was a school pageant, this is something else. So what was a school pageant like, if you can remember?
That's so interesting. Here, they're a big deal. The number of school pageants that I judge here in South Carolina is insane. Middle school, high school, you name it. So for middle school, it was literally we did an opening number on stage, and then we did like a 3-minute interview with the judges, and then we
Wow.
did evening gown, and that was the pageant. Same thing for high school, but different high schools do it different ways. I've judged high school pageants that have a talent portion. I've judged high school pageants that don't have an interview. I've judged high school pageants that have a 10-minute interview. I now run a high school pageant, and we did theme wear. So we had a theme, and they had to. It was kind of like fun fashion, kind of like your country at Miss Universe. But yeah, they're really big here. They're a really big deal.
What this is interesting. I had no idea you run a pageant of your own. So you obviously you're competing in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. You have judged and you are a director, so you sort of got that trifecta. You've been all three. Can I ask you, what do you look for? Because I did an episode about this the other day about what pageant judges look for, because I sometimes feel they're not as prepared as they should be. And if I ever get asked to judge, I take it very seriously, as I think I should, because you know how much hard work goes into it. But for yourself, when you're sitting in the judge's chair, what are you looking for?
Oh, that's a great question. I've judged tons of pageants at this point, so I'm like you. I take it very seriously, but I'm always looking for someone who is genuine and someone who is very authentically themselves. And in high school, that's it's kind of hard to put that on a kid, because you
Yeah,
don't know who you are in any way, shape, or form. But I'm looking for someone who knows kind of what they want the title for. They're not doing it because their mom told them that they should do it. They're not doing
yeah,
it because they feel like they deserve it. They're doing it because they genuinely want to represent their school, or they want the platform that comes with having the title. All of those things, those are the things that I'm looking for at the high school level. And then when I get to, more serious pageants, state, local pageants, I'm looking for, do they have that quality that you
yeah.
can't really put a finger on, but they just pull you into them, and they're taking the work seriously, they're prioritizing their platform, all of those things.
Yeah, I was giving some thought to what sort of sets certain title holders apart. I was interviewed recently, and someone asked me, can I tell when someone is going to win? And I said no, because you never know how the judging in a pageant is going to go. But definitely, sometimes you meet someone and you go, there's something different about this girl. And I said, it's like when they walk in a room and then all heads turn, not just because of the way she looks, but there's a certain presence about that person. And I worked as a tennis coach in a girls' high school. I can only imagine what it would be like trying to be yourself at that age. Because, like, to first be yourself, you have to know yourself. And I think at that age, it's really, really difficult. Can I just ask, how long have you been a teacher for?
I just finished my third year teaching, but I
Right.
worked in schools for 3 years before that. So I've been
Okay.
working in schools for like 6 years.
Okay. And obviously, you've been to school yourself. I just wanted to ask, as someone who's a young teacher, can you tell me what are some of the ways in which the average school day or schooling has changed? Because I've been out of the school system now probably 7 years or so, and even then, there was social media was coming out, the internet came out, and everything was changing so quickly. Not necessarily for the better, by the way. But I'm just curious, what have you witnessed in terms of your schooling and then your experience now being a teacher? How has school been changing over the last, let's say, 10 years or so?
The biggest change that myself and all of my colleagues see is the impact of phones and the impact of the
Mm,
internet. I didn't get a phone until I was 15, until I could drive, and all of my friends had them. But now there are kids in my third grade classroom that have a phone, that are texting their friends, that are calling their ride. Uh, when we have intruder drills, they're texting their parents like, "Oh, like something happened," before we can even, tell them that it was a drill. So that's been a huge thing. The other thing is like the memes and the internet knowledge that these kids know. It's almost impossible to keep up with, and it's also
yeah,
impossible to monitor.
yeah,
So I'm as a young teacher, I know more of the social media, more of the
mm,
lingo, more of what's popular, but it's rapidly changing. And the way that some of my kids will start having a bit and having a thing on Monday, and then by Friday it's completely different and it's
Yeah.
mind into
Yeah.
something different is wild. And so not my school, my state this year im, implemented
Right.
a ban on cell phones in schools
Mm.
from bell to bell basically. And it's been wild to watch the impact that it's had on kids. And I don't see it as much at the elementary level, but my brother who's 17 and is in high school, he tells us all the time, he's like, kids are actually talking to each other and they're not doing
Wow.
this all day every day, and they're able to kind of build more interpersonal relationships and all that stuff because they're not listening to
Yeah.
music, they're not sending each other TikToks, they're not texting. So that's been really hard to navigate in a lot of ways, especially when parents kind of enable and they aren't as supportive as we as teachers would like them to be.
Say no more. I love hearing that that ban was implemented. We had something similar over here in Australia recently, and I couldn't believe that anyone was arguing about it, saying, oh, it's my phone. I was just like, we're not taking your phone. We're just saying between bell and bell, you don't use it. And then, it's like, wow, what a mind blowing concept. When you take away someone's phone, they actually have to develop interpersonal skills. But I mean, like at my age, I didn't, when I grew up, when I was a kid, we didn't have mobile phones. And so you like to think when mobile phones come out, at least you have some experience. You can make sort of an educated decision because you're older. But I can only imagine if you're born in this day and age and you grow up with social media and a phone, like having it taken away, it must feel it's almost like an addiction. It's like someone's taking away the thing that you spend all your time on. I mean, was there any resistance to having that ban implemented?
There definitely was a lot of resistance, and some of it some of it from parents, some of it from
Yeah,
students. Kind of what you said of, "Oh, it's my phone, like they can't take it from me," kind of thing. And what's been nice about it is because it's from the state government, the responsibility doesn't fall on us as teachers. It's state law. Oh, it's mandated by the state. So if you have a problem with it, you can contact the State Department. So it's removed some of the burden from us. But when we have our mandatory testing at the end of the year, I have to take up all of the devices. They can't have phones, they can't have smartwatches. That's been a big thing recently is kids have like miniature Apple watches that are just designed for kids. And I had a parent that was like, "Why can't my kid wear his watch? I'll put it in school mode. He won't communicate with me." And I have to be like, "I will be investigated by the FBI if your child wears his watch. I'm so sorry. I'm not going to jail for you. I'm not wearing an orange jumpsuit for you. Keep the watch at home for this one day. If you have any concerns, you can call the school." So that was just kind of frustrating. It's like y- there are systems in place for a reason. You can contact the school, you can contact me, you have my contact information, you have my phone number.
yeah,
Your child doesn't need to have access to you 24/7.
yeah. I think sometimes people forget that we used to survive without phones. I really think they do. My nephew, I think he's 10 or 11 years old, he also has an Apple Watch, and it's not cheap, by the way. And I just look at it, and he never uses it for the things that parents will tell you, oh, if he's in trouble, this and that. There's like a kidnap alarm, and I'm like, he's never used it for that. But I'm looking at it going, that's a really good target for someone who wants to, beat him up and take his watch. It's like $1,000 watch, maybe even more. And I
Mhm.
just don't understand sometimes what's going on. Can I ask you as a teacher? So you were there before the ban was implemented and
Mhm.
now after, what is the difference? I can only imagine in the classroom itself, it must be a night and day difference.
Yeah, and I don't see it as much because at the younger age, not as many of them had phones, but sometimes it varies from class to class. In my class last year, a lot of them had phones and
Mm.
they were very into social media and all of that stuff. And so they were taking it on field trips and sneaking it like in the bus on field trips and taking pictures of each other. And then now this year, I wouldn't know if they did have phones because I never see them and I'm not having to deal with them. And in terms of the watches, usually I don't police those as much unless
Yeah.
they become an issue. Like I had one kid that got one and he was like taking pictures of his classmates and like recording while we were doing things in class. And I was like, okay. we gotta confiscate the watch. But it really has been a huge difference, and it's relieving for me as a teacher because I don't have to be
Yeah.
like policing kids all the time to make sure that they put their phones away.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thing. I can only imagine. I mean, even if the ban hadn't been there, if I was teaching, I would tell people, put your phones on your desks and don't touch them. Otherwise, I'm going to throw them in a bucket of water. But I mean,
Right.
what's it like for yourself? What got you into teaching? Because I spent some time thinking about teaching. As I said, I was a tennis coach at an all-girls school, and so I was a coach, not a teacher. And then I thought, okay, maybe I should try the teaching thing. And I got like 6 months into it and I just decided I can't do this. Not because I don't love teaching, but all the hoops that I had to jump through and how thankless it is. I think it's probably worse in America than it is here. But I don't think teachers get nearly enough respect. I certainly don't think they get paid enough. And it's such an important job. Like, I mean, if the parents are both working, your kid might be spending more time with the teacher than with the parents. And so, talk about role model, this and that. But what got you into teaching in the first place?
I have always loved school and I've always loved learning. In middle school, I learned all of the English kings and queens in order because I just wanted to. Um,
Wow.
I love to read. I love learning new things. I love Jeopardy and trivia just because I someone told me one time I have the strangest knowledge base of anyone they've ever met because I'm just one of those people like, fun fact, did you know that blah blah blah. So I think when I was deciding on my career in high school and what path I was going to take, I don't think anyone in my family was shocked that I chose teaching. It was just kind of like, yeah, like that makes sense. So it was never a question for me. It was just kind of like, yeah, I think I'll do that. Now, what I wanted to teach, that was kind of a question for me. Like I said, I love history. So I was like, do I want to teach high school history or do I want to teach, littles? And I kind of was like, high schoolers are mean and I don't want to deal with that. So I was like, little ones it is. And so far, haven't regretted my decision. So
It's interesting. I always enjoyed teaching the teenagers a little bit more, only because they could be so stroppy at times. And so when you manage to break through to them and you make them realize that I'm not going to put up with all your nonsense, then it's very gratifying. But I'm not going to lie, when they're being troublesome, yeah, you got to not be afraid of conflict and laying the law down a little bit. Jeopardy. So if there's ever any like pageant Jeopardy, I'm certainly going on your team. What you said, you have a weird knowledge base. Like, what are some of the weird? Like, can you give me a fun fact? Because I'm hopeless at Jeopardy. Like, I say I have no trivia. Like, never take me anywhere. Maybe except for tennis, because I used to be a tennis coach. But like, what are these fun facts that you come up with?
see, I'm so bad at doing them on the spot. But South Carolina is called the Palmetto State because our tree is the palmetto tree, and it goes back to the Revolutionary War. There was a battle where they made a fort out of palmetto logs, and they ended up winning because the cannonballs sunk into the tree. But South Carolina used to be called the Iodine State because we produce the most iodine in the country. So, and Georgia is the peach state, but South Carolina produces more peaches than Georgia. So there's just a few South Carolina fun facts for you. There's a lot more where that came from, but
I have a good friend over in South Carolina, and I mentioned this when I was talking to Berkeley because she's from South Carolina. And my South Carolinian friend informed me, did you know Georgia is a peach state? Yes. While South Carolina produces more and better quality. This is the important part. The more and better quality peaches. I asked Berkeley about this, and she didn't really want to get in the middle of it. Would you care to weigh in? What's your opinion? I know there's more. Are they equal to Georgia peaches? Are they better? Do you not want to get in the middle of it?
so of course I'm partial to South Carolina peaches. My hometown every year has a peach festival and they do peach everything, peach ice cream, they do barbecue, they do peach julep, they do peach like sorbet, everything peach that you could possibly imagine. And so of course I have to say South Carolina peaches are superior. No hate to Miss Georgia.
I think that's only fair, right? If you're coming from your state, you have to back your state. Is
That's
peach
nice.
what's peach julep?
It's like a drink. It's kind of
Okay.
like a juice kind of drink, for lack of a better explanation. It's
I
quite
mean,
good.
I like peach, so I'm more than happy with that. We you're competing, I'm going. You're competing in under 2 weeks. What are the emotions like at the moment? Are you just excited to go? You can't wait. Is it a bit nerves? Is it like ask me every 5 minutes because it changes? Like what's the emotions like at the moment?
So I was I like I said, I competed at Miss South Carolina for 5 years, and then I did Miss South Carolina Volunteer, and those were always very intense, and we always had a lot of competitors. But preparing for this is a completely different mindset, and it's a completely different train of thought, and that's been really challenging for me. Like with Miss South Carolina, there was always the idea of, oh, I can always do it again. If it doesn't work out for me, there's always next year. And this is there's no second chance. This is one and done. So kind of the idea that I I need to leave everything out there. I don't get a second chance at this. I'm competing against girls from all across the country instead of girls that are 3 hours away from me. So that's blowing my mind a little bit, and just trying to force myself to, number one, not have imposter syndrome. Number two, embrace every moment and enjoy every moment, because I know that this is going to fly by. And this is such an amazing opportunity that I've been blessed with. And I don't want to take it for granted. I want to do my best, but I also want to get so much out of it, make so many new friends, be proud of how I represent my state and how I represent myself. And so I'm trying to focus less on the competitiveness, because I'm very competitive by nature. And so it's hard for me to see a competition and just be like, just go have fun, because I'm like, I want to win. But I'm really trying to set that aside and just focus on enjoy it, enjoy the experience, make the memories, make the friends, because you only get to do it once.
It's funny whenever I talk to a competitive person, and I am one, tennis coach. Tennis, you win or lose. There's no draw, and you play until you win or lose. And then you'd tell someone, oh, just have some fun. And they're like, yeah, but it'd be more fun to win. And it's like, yeah, I can't really argue with that. I don't think anyone enjoys losing. You've had your title, I think, since July of last year. So that's been a while. Can you give people an understanding, give us an overview of what your sort of year of reign has been like? What are some of the things that, what are the highlights? What's some of the things that you're most proud of having done over the last almost 12 months?
Oh, that's such a loaded question, so many parts to that. My number one, coming after Berkeley, has been very empowering and inspiring, and also so much to live up to, because Berkeley was amazing and is amazing. Um, the biggest thing for me is working and doing this. I felt like I was doing
Mm.
two full-time jobs. And South Carolina is not very big. You can drive from one end to the other in about 4 hours. But when you're working from 7:30 to 3:30 every day, and then you're traveling 3 hours to an appearance, it gets kind of draining and it gets to be a lot. So that's been the biggest part of my year for me, is time management and just making sure that I am pouring into myself just as much as I'm pouring into others. But that being said, I've gotten to do some really cool things. We got to go to New York Fashion Week back in September, so that was so much fun. We went to the Sherry Hill show. Thank you to Paige and Miss at Joanne's for that experience. Um, we got to serve at the Harlem Soup Kitchen in New York City through the Salvation Army. So the service part has always been super fundamental to me, super important. Getting to do these service projects with the Salvation Army, whether at their golf tournament a couple weeks ago, whether working behind the scenes, unloading boxes, loading food into the food pantry, those kinds of things. But my favorite appearances have been speaking ones, where I get to just go and talk to people. I've done a lot of those, and speaking to kids, speaking to teenagers, those are always my favorite, because those are my people. That's my demographic. That's where I feel like I can resonate the most. And so I've gotten to talk to groups about self-confidence, about imposter syndrome, about success. And that's kind of been the the best experiences for me this year.
When you do, I mean that's a lot, obviously, which is great. When you do speak to the younger demographic, so not adults, teenagers, younger ones, what do you find is a key to connecting with them and communicating with them? Because a lot of people have difficulties connecting with a younger generation. I often think it's because they talk down to them. And I think you absolutely cannot do that. I think you have to share a story, not tell them you should do this. But what obviously you've had a lot of practice at this. What have been some of the keys to not just communicating but connecting with a younger audience?
I was just about to say kind of what you said. I I feel like a common problem is people either assume that kids are don't know enough or that they
Mm,
know too much, and so they'll try to use a word with a 5-year-old that a 5-year-old's not going to understand, or they'll talk to a 10-year-old like a 5-year-old, and that's a quick way to lose your audience with a kid. They, as a general rule, they want to be treated their age or even older than that. If
yeah.
you can just approach them on their level, like you said, tell a story or use something that is relatable to them. If you know Italian brain rot and you want to talk to them about that, then connect with them on that level, whatever it is with them, but make sure that you are talking to them appropriately for their age level. I was at an appearance yesterday with my teen one of my teen queens, and we were talking to a big group of ages 5 to 11. And so in that way, I usually talk just how I'm talking to you, but I tend to use fewer big words. I love a big word, and I just tend to tone down my big words or explain the big words when I do use them. And she would kind of say things sometimes and not explain. And of course, she's a teenager, she doesn't know. But you have to make sure that your messaging is clear with kids and that you are talking to them like an adult, basically.
It's funny you say you love big words. I love big words too, but one of the things I realized when I started interviewing is it's really bad if you use a word that the other person doesn't understand. And so I think I've lost my perspicacity to use a big word. I think my vocabulary has shrunk a lot and I use very monosyllabic words to make it easier to understand. I mean, do you have a favorite? I'm thinking mellifluous. I like the sound of that word. But do you have favorite words to use that you just don't get to drop in every now and then?
Oh gosh, see, my problem is that they just kind of escape and I don't really realize that I'm using them
Yeah.
until people look at me and they're like, What does that mean?" And yeah, oh, okay, like I guess here's a synonym, you know. But my other problem is because I read so much, sometimes I'll use words, but I'll mispronounce them because I've only ever seen them written out.
Yeah.
And so then people definitely don't know what I'm talking about because I'm not pronouncing the word correctly. So I have to be really careful of that. But audiobooks have helped with that a lot.
Audiobooks are a great time saver as well. It's a lot easier to listen to an audiobook when you're driving than trying to read whilst driving. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that. Or
Wouldn't
trying to
recommend
read
that.
whilst on the treadmill. Um,
Yeah.
tell me away from obviously you're working teacher and you're trying to fit all the appearances in, so you're super busy. But away from the teaching and away from the pageantry, tell me a bit more about yourself. Like, what was your story growing up? Because I feel like there's a story to tell here. Otherwise, you wouldn't love talking to kids so much. So, what was your story growing up?
Well, I kind of went into it earlier, but my dad came out as gay when I was 10. And so he and my mom divorced,
Mm,
and then we kind of split time between houses growing up as I was going through middle school, and we moved a lot, just kind of bouncing back and forth. And so I didn't really realize it until I got older, but I think part of what motivated me to be a teacher was I was always the kid that my homework was at the other parent's house, or
mm,
I left my book at my mom's house and I was staying with my dad, or I didn't have I remember I came to school one time in like shorts and UGG boots because my UGG boots were the only shoes that I had at my dad's house. And so I kind of wanted to be that teacher that understood, you know, when kids come from different situations. And so that really impacted me, but also my dad's story about not only being gay, but being a pastor. And
Mhm.
those two things kind of in the early 2000s being very judged and
Yeah.
not being, you couldn't conflate the two in a lot of people's
Yeah.
eyes. That kind of empowered me to start my S.E.R.V.E initiative, the Love Thy Neighbor initiative. And now it pushes me into my work with South Carolina Pride and even, working in the classroom, talking to my students about
Mm.
empathy and not judging a book by its cover and even saying, well, boys can wear pink. That's okay. Things like that. Just those are all things that kind of drove me and kind of built upon each other until I'm in the position that I'm in now, which is super cool.
Can I ask you about your experience growing up? So going to school, did you find that most teachers and your friends, when I assume at some point they found out or you told them what was going on, um, were most of them, particularly the teachers, were they did you feel understood and accepted, or did you always feel a bit like you were the outsider?
So I never really told my teachers. I think in middle school I did, and they were always very supportive.
Right.
But most of the time, my parents were very good about they would show up to events together, or
Mm,
if we had an awards show, if we had a performance, they would sit together. So, other than the fact that I like my stepdads were there and things like that, a lot of people probably wouldn't have known. In terms of friends, I never hid it and I was always open about it, but I also didn't talk about it that much either. I
yeah.
didn't really bring it up, or if I wanted to have friends over, I would invite them to my mom's house because I was scared of what their parents would say if they went to my dad's house. Or I knew that my mom's house had the more perception of normalcy than at my
Yeah.
dad's house. And so I, it wasn't until high school that I kind of got up the courage to tell some of my friends about it. And one of my friends goes, wait, that's so cool. And that was kind of when I was like, no, like, who else have you met that has three dads and one mom, and, um, their dad is also a pastor. And I realized how poised I am to tell a story that you don't hear very often and
Yeah.
what that representation could look like to other kids. And so that was kind of that moment where I was like, you know what, this is cool. And if someone has a problem with it, then I don't want to be friends with them anyway.
Yeah.
And when I was going through school, it was very popular to say, oh, that's gay. And that was
Mm,
for me something that I was like, actually, let's not use that word because you're using it in a negative connotation and it's really not a negative thing. So it kind of taught me to use my voice and empowered me to speak up for what I believed in.
and can I ask you, because I'm fascinated, I was thinking about religion just this morning, and I read through the entire Bible, cover to cover a couple of years ago, just because I felt that that book has been around for so long, there must be some wisdom in it, and I would say that I'm religious, but probably not in the traditional sense. When people, I haven't gone. Don't want to say that far, but I'm some like everyone has their own journey, and I'm just focusing on that. But your dad being, as you said, a pastor, and then coming out as gay, and you already pointed to, there's some inherent conflict there. What was your dad's journey like? Because I got to imagine there's no small amount of courage required when you're a pastor to come out as gay, because I got to imagine there was, I don't know how much judgment there. So can you just speak to that a little bit, what you can?
Yeah, I think my dad very early on kind of knew, and he knew that there was a conflict. And he knew that his family would not be supportive if
Right.
he were to come out to them. And so I think he he married my mom, he had us, me and my siblings, and so he kind of was like, this is the life that I'm choosing to live. I'm choosing my fate. And as we started to grow up, my dad kind of was exposed to more people that were religious that were also gay and started to
Mm,
realize that those things could coexist.
yeah.
And so he and my mom made the decision to separate and to get divorced. And it came with a lot of turmoil for them and a lot of things that they
Sure.
both had to work through for sure. They were really great about not giving those things to me and my siblings.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
I was telling them the other day that I only have positive associations from the time period of the divorce, which is
Mm.
rare.
Mm.
So they deserve so much credit for that. But as he kind of came out, I remember him coming out was front page news in our small hometown. It
Wow.
was a huge deal. And then the church that he was at the time ultimately had to hold a vote as to whether or not they wanted to keep him, and he ended up resigning. And so then for several years after that, he couldn't get a pastoral job. No church would take him, and we would even go to other churches, and they would be like, "Where's your wife? Where's your wife? Where's your wife?" And he was kind of like, "Oh, she's at home," you know.
Mm.
um, but as as he continued in that journey, he was embraced by our synod, which is like the group of churches in our state, and kind of encouraged by our bishop and all of those things. And so we're at a very different point now than we were a long time
Yeah.
ago. And so that's been really cool to watch as his daughter, kind of how brave he had to be, and
Yeah.
going against everything that he was taught from a very young age and choosing to be himself despite what his family said and despite what other people around him said, despite losing lots of friends in the
Yeah.
process. Uh, and now it's come a long way, and our synod is so much more supportive than they used to be, and even I think the church as a whole is as well.
Yeah. It, it's fascinating to hear that story because I can only imagine for him being working in religion, working in the church, and then coming face to face with the fact that the people that he's worked with are probably at that time anyway not particularly understanding and not being able to find a job. And I often I have problems with this because I just think, well, what would Jesus say or what would Jesus do? And I don't think Jesus would act the same way that the church often does. I mean, that's a conversation for maybe a different podcast. But I really think it's about accepting other people. I don't even like just because you're gay doesn't mean you're not a role model. Like to me, it doesn't, and it's not like a contagious thing. It's not. I really don't understand it. So I can only and then getting front page news. I mean, it's difficult enough for pageant girls to get coverage, and your dad got it without wanting it. Um,
Right.
but I really also want to say I honor the fact that your parents were able to handle the split and not put you kids in the middle of it. Because again, having worked in tennis coaching, a lot of the girls that I was coaching came from broken families, and the parents were not nearly that respectful. They would almost use the kids as bargaining chips, and the emotional damage it caused on the kids was terrifying, if I'm honest. Um, here's a higher level question. Do you think we're getting better as a society in general? And let's focus on America. Do you think the Western world, anyway, do you think we're getting better as a society at accepting people who, for want of a better word, are different?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'd like to think so. Uh, Speaking plainly, in the current political climate in America, it's it doesn't seem like it.
Mm,
And I have seen a lot of evidence of people getting more bold with their hatred, which
yeah.
breaks my heart and is incredibly disheartening to see. And working with South Carolina Pride, so many of the people that I work with and myself are scared and are
Mm,
very, very nervous in my state. Our attorney general just sent Columbia, my city, the capital of South Carolina, just sent them basically a letter saying, if you do not remove your ban on conversion therapy, the state will not give you three to $4 million. And that's incredibly disheartening because this is something that Columbia is so proud of, that we're the only city in South Carolina to have a conversion therapy ban. And now the city council's hands are pretty much tied because they don't know where else to get the funding from. And so, as a whole, as a society, I'd like to think that we're making progress. And I think social media helps a lot with that. But sometimes to take two steps forward, you have to take one step back. And
Mm,
unfortunately, I think that right now we're taking a few steps backwards.
mm,
And it's the situation that we're in, unfortunately.
yeah. I I really dislike the current political climate only because I feel it's more, regardless of which way you believe, I really don't care. But there's no need for it to be so divisive. And I would really wish that politics would just go back to the time when it was boring and we weren't allowed to talk about it, because I don't want, I don't want the leader of a country to want to be famous or, some sort of social
Yep.
media megastar. No, just go and do your job, the job you're getting paid for, the job you got voted in for.
Right.
And it's just, we recently had a federal election here, a national election in Australia. There was one in Canada, obviously. And it, like, again, regardless of which way you believe, like, it's so divisive now. Um, and so it does feel in many ways we've come a long way. Um, but then at the same time, it almost feels. Have you ever thought that maybe this is the last push back against sort of more acceptance? Because when you push against something, there's always like a resistance to it, and maybe this is that last gasp of people who think that being able to hate people is normal. Is that possibly it?
I'd like to think so. I really hope that's the case. I have a lot of hope for my generation and Generation Alpha and Generation Beta. Uh, I I have a lot of hope for them and that they can start to push back against what they were taught and make opinions for themselves, especially due to seeing so many different opinions on social media. Uh, I'd like to think that they'll make the best decisions for themselves. I say that though, and then the other day I was talking to someone and I was telling them about my dad, and they said, "Oh, I think all of that gay stuff is disgusting," and used a slur. And so I would like to say that I think it's making progress, and I hope truly with every part of my being that it is, but only time will tell.
Yeah, I don't. What you said, you just heard. I don't understand where it's coming from. If that makes any kind of sense, like I can never imagine telling someone that, I mean, a behavior. I mean, even if you say a behavior is disgusting. I mean, me, sitting in my underwear on the couch eating Cheetos. I mean, I would probably call that disgusting. But to call someone's life choices, and in many ways, it's not a conscious choice. You have a certain way that you want to live your life, and to label that as disgusting, I don't understand it. And I certainly think, again, regardless of which political way you go, I think the current political climate has emboldened certain people to think that they can say that because it's just my opinion, so I'll say whatever I want. And I've always felt like, yes, you have the right to free speech, but you have the right to say whatever you want. But you also have to be aware that there are consequences to what you say. And I think this is a giant piece that's missing. Yes, you get to say whatever you want, but what are the consequences of it? And are you going to accept those consequences? If you say something horrible to someone and they go and harm themselves or take their own lives, are you willing to take the consequence of that? And I just don't think people think that far ahead. I mean, do you want to weigh in on this? Because that's how I feel about it.
I agree, and it was just very I could never in my life have I told someone my story and about my dad being gay and then just blatantly to my face
Yeah.
tell me that it's disgusting. I get a lot of people like, "Oh, tell me more about that,"
Mm.
or, maybe that goes against my beliefs, but I want to hear more about it.
Yeah.
But to blatantly be told straight up, "I think it's disgusting," and then use a slur,
Yeah.
that was just so flooring to me because I can't imagine what you're like among like your friends and among people
Yeah.
you're comfortable with, if that's the
Yeah.
way that you're treating people. And just like as someone who grew up in the church and just in general wanting to be a good person, I would never say those things about someone else.
Mm.
And I've just always been taught to be a light for others, to be kind, treat people like you want to be treated. You never know what someone's going through. You never know their situation. And I apparently some people weren't taught that, or they were and they just choose to ignore it, which is worse.
I think even worse than that, sometimes they think they're just speaking their truth. I think
Hmm.
that's the worst one, when it's like they think they're actually doing something good by stating that. And I'm like, what? How? I mean, I can only imagine how narrow your circle of friends must be if anytime. I think it comes from fear. Fear. It's not about the disgusting at all. I think it's just some people are really afraid of anything that's a bit different to what they're used to. And the world we're going into is changing so rapidly. I do have some amount of empathy for those people, because they're going to be left very far behind. Working with young kids as you do, it's not just about the information, is it? It's also about, at least I like to think, a good teacher. You remember the good teachers not because they taught you math or they taught you history, but because, for me, they kept the class in check. So, maybe borderline strict, but they were respectful, and they taught you certain beliefs and values, and you looked up to them. So I mean, does that factor into your daily? You're in front of these young kids. How important is being the role model and helping them live a great life, as opposed to just being a vassal for information?
That to me is everything. At the core of what I do as an educator is relationships. And I believe that in order for kids to learn, they have to feel safe in their environment and they have to feel welcome in their environment.
Hmm.
And so every morning in my classroom, my kids greet each other by name. So they say, "Good morning, so and so. Good morning, so and so." And we
Nice.
go around the circle. So every
Yeah.
day, an adult or a child is telling them good morning. Every day before they leave, I say, "I love you. I'll see you tomorrow." If they come in late, I'm like, "I'm so glad you're here. You made it. We missed you." Because I want them to know that they have an adult that, number one, loves them, cares about them, and that is in their corner cheering for them. Because I don't know if they
Mm.
get that at home or not. Some of them might not. But
Yeah.
if they feel safe at school and if they have a teacher that advocates for them, then they're going to put in the effort to learn and they're going to want to learn and they're going to want to do well. One of my favorite things to come out of this year, I had a very diverse class this year, which it doesn't tend to happen. I had two Jewish students, I had two Muslim students. My class was about 50-50 racially. So we talked a lot about different cultures. We learned different greetings in different languages. And when it came time for the holidays, a lot of my coworkers were doing Christmas celebrations. And I was like, we're not going to do that. Like, we have a lot of different beliefs in here.
Yeah.
So I encouraged my Jewish students to bring in dreidels and they talked about Hanukkah. And then my Muslim students, I encouraged them to come teach us about Islam. And on the day that my one of my Muslim students in particular was coming to teach us about Islam, he brought in a prayer rug. He brought in pictures of his prayer room at home, and he was telling all of his classmates about it. And after he finished, he came up to me and he said, "I was so nervous doing
Mm.
it when I practiced it in front of my mom." And he was like,
Yeah.
"I wasn't nervous at all doing it in front of my friends." And he said, "Miss Coffman, this is the best day of my life." Because he got to show his friends about his culture and about
Yeah.
his beliefs. And his friends were so supportive. They wanted to
Hmm.
ask him questions about it. And then after that, I cleared out a space in one of my storage closets and I made him a prayer room. And so I put up an E so he knew which direction east was.
Yeah.
He left his prayer mat there, and every little bit during the day he'd say, "Can I go pray?" I'd be like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." We left the door open. He just came in and out. And then halfway through the year, he brought in a Quran tracing book, and so I tried tracing in Arabic, which was backwards, left or right to left, which was
Yeah.
weird. And so he taught me about that. He got to show his friends Arabic, and he told me at the end of the year, he said, "Miss Kaufman, none of my teachers have ever cared about my religion before." None of
Yeah.
them have ever asked. And he said, that's why you're my favorite teacher ever. And that meant more to me than anything another kid could say because he felt safe in my classroom to be himself. None of his classmates judged him for it. It was just, oh, like, or sometimes I'd be like, where's he at? And his classmates would be like, oh, he's praying. And so it was just normal. And I want all of my kids to feel that. I go to their soccer games on the weekends. I go to their performances, sometimes on Tuesday nights when that's the last thing I want to do. I have former students that still invite me to their games. So I try to build them up by building a relationship with them and knowing that an adult's in their corner and hoping that that impacts everything else that they do.
I mean, it does. It will have to. I mean, it's only us adults who learn to hate other people. I mean, hatred is a learned behavior. You don't grow up knowing what hate means. And I love just hearing that, the kids are accepting of it and that your student wasn't nervous at all because he felt he was coming into a place that was safe and respected his beliefs. And, if you take that out 5 years, 10 years from now, that leads us to a much better place than we seem to be at the moment with everything that's going on. Um, but I mean, that to me, that really is the essence of a teacher, isn't it? I mean, even if you go back to, Christianity, I mean, that is essentially what Jesus was a teacher. And he was not teaching us math or history. He was teaching us how to lead a better life. And so, I mean, that has to, when you heard that from your student, that you're his favorite teacher because specifically of what you did, that has to feel pretty good, right?
It it felt really good because sometimes as a teacher you think, oh, I'm not doing enough, or
Yeah.
oh, you it's easy to let the negative situations get the best of you. I had a really tough situation with a child this year in my class, and so it was at the time I was like, I am trying my best and it's not enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying so hard to pour into these kids and I don't know if they're getting any of it. And just him saying that the bare minimum for in my eyes, the bare minimum for
Yeah.
me made such an impact on him. That was what I held on to on those days when it was really challenging, was
Yeah.
like, if this kid gets nothing out of this year, he got that he was safe in here and
Yeah.
that I was there for him, and that meant the world to me.
Yeah. I mean, you never know exactly how big a difference that can make, maybe, some time down the track. As a teacher, I just wanted to grab your opinion. The world is changing extremely rapidly. We've already talked about phones and, you're younger, so social media. I can only imagine if you're 50, 60 years old and you didn't grow up with a phone and you're like, what's this Facebook thing? Insta what? And Snapchat who? Tick what? And then like, but now we've got AI coming into it, and that's really shaking up a lot of teachers because now a student can use AI to write an essay. This probably wouldn't apply to grade three, but you know the world's changing extremely rapidly. I think faster than a lot of people realize. You're going to be at the forefront of it because you're dealing with these young kids, and they grow up with stuff like ChatGPT, and they're just used to it. Um, where do you see this all leading to from your perspective as a teacher?
That is a really tough question because of the age that I teach, I'm right poised
Yeah,
kind of on the cusp of it. So my kids don't know how to use ChatGPT, and for that I'm very thankful. But and we also do a lot of things on paper in my classroom because I'm just old fashioned like that, and I believe that if you do things on paper, you're going to remember them more. But we're also learning cursive because it's in our state standards to learn cursive, which a lot of people say is a dying and lost art. So we're really on this in this weird place where they're supposed to be 21st century learners and they're supposed to be very technologically fluent. They go to a class and learn coding, which I have no idea how to do, but they take it and run with it.
yeah.
But then we're sitting in there writing sentences in cursive. And so I, it's hard to know, I think, where all of this is going to lead.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that, in my eyes personally, I'd like to think that classrooms shift back a little bit more traditional. because I feel like it's more beneficial for students. But of course, no one asks me. I just do what I'm told. So um, I could see. I definitely think that AI is going to be a huge problem in the
Mm.
coming years. As much as it's helpful and as much as it's a tool, academically, it presents a lot of issues, and I feel like it stunts critical thinking. So I think that that's a big problem, especially for younger generations that I'm kind of keeping an eye on.
I just want to harp on the, when you said you were old fashioned and you felt that writing actually helps you memorize it better, that there's actually very good biological, like neuroscience reasons for that. Because when you write something, it engages certain muscles that really do drive it deep into the brain in a way that typing it does not. I mean, your teachers as a general, I think you're going to have you're going to have your work cut out for you because the world is changing so rapidly, and obviously you have to try to stay in front of that. You don't want to be teaching something that's out of date. But I agree with you because I think you do. I use AI all the time, but then I had the benefit of growing up without it. So I had time to develop the skills that now I can apply to AI. But I think if you just go into it when you're very young and you haven't developed the critical thinking skills and other skills, it does stunt your growth because you're now relying on a machine to do it for you. And then without the machine, you're no one. But it's going to be interesting. I don't know how it will affect your age group in particular, but it's going to because it's going to affect everyone. So how how do you stay in front of everything in a world that's changing as rapidly as it does? You're going to have probably to spend quite a lot of time just keeping up to date with all the things that aren't quite as old fashioned as perhaps you would like.
Yeah, it is tricky. We have all of my students have one-to-one Chromebooks, and we have software that can monitor what they're doing on their Chromebooks, and so I can see
Right.
their screen at any given moment. I can close out their tabs on their Chromebooks, but a lot of them have figured out ways to bypass it. Like
I
they
was
love
going to say.
Minecraft, and
Yeah.
Minecraft we cannot watch on their screens. So they
Right.
can have the browser pulled up and it can look like they're working, but they can just be building their little world in Minecraft and I could have no idea. And so that presents a lot of challenges too because kids are sneaky and
Yep.
they get away with a lot of stuff that parents have no idea, that adults have no idea.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to stay on top of it because of the prevalence of social media, they're getting all of this stuff a lot of times way faster than we are.
Yeah.
So I I don't know where it's hard to say,
Yeah.
truthfully.
Yeah. So you're not a Minecraft fan? You don't play like an hour every day or something?
I loved Minecraft in my middle school years. That was like me and my siblings. That was what we always did on the weekends. We would go at it, building worlds and stuff. I'm just not a gamer in general. I just don't, it doesn't appeal to me now. So I'd rather read my book, watch my TV shows, do something that requires a little bit less brain power.
It's funny because I do play games with my brother quite often, but I've never played Minecraft. And apparently, recently a Minecraft movie came out, and my
Hmm.
nephew was really excited to go and see it, and he loved it. And I just felt so old because I was like, I don't understand. Why do you want to go and watch a movie about people making square blocks? And I did, I
The
didn't
kids
understand. I
love the Minecraft movie. The number of times my kids yelled chicken jockey is insane. I don't
don't
even know
even
what
know
that
if it.
means,
I no
but I
no.
know it's from the movie.
Okay. I mean, my nephew had a Minecraft cake. So, I like to think that I'm keeping up with the times, and sometimes I don't know if you ever feel like this, but you have a young kid say something and you're like, what does that mean? Like, is that even English? And then people start using words in ways that they're not. So like, what was that one? Very demure. There was that
Yeah,
meme going around, and that got me so angry because it's like, you are not using this word correctly, and it got me so infuriated.
the
That's
worst
more.
thing though is when kids, it is so hard when kids insult each other and it's funny. It is so hard for me to keep a straight face and be like, you should, we can't say
Like,
that. You can't say that about people. In a different situation, I would be laughing, but you can't say that right now. I had one kid who was just very like he would just blurt things out, and the worst possible times we are silent, we're standing in a line in the hallway, And then his most recent tick was he'd sing like that Gangnam Style song, and it'd be perfectly silent, and he'd be like, "Oppa Gangnam Style," and I could not keep it together. And it's so hard because I'm laughing because it's funny, but I have to be like, "No, we are silent. We're in line. We're in the hallway." Oh my gosh, it kills me. That's what gets me every time.
Did you do the whole dance with it?
Every every once in a while, I'd be like, but you can't get too far into it because then it's like, oh, sexy lady, and I can't have them
Yeah,
going down that road.
yeah, you probably don't want that in your class. That's really funny though. I don't think that ever happened when I was coaching tennis. We had other things, but no, no, kids grow up quickly these days. That's the world we live in. Um,
Mhm.
Maddie, if you are fortunate enough to segue very smoothly back to pageantry for a sec, if you are fortunate enough to have that crown placed on your head in a couple of weeks' time, what are you going to do with it?
I Going back to building relationships, that's my biggest goal. This program is so new and it's in its infancy. And when I won Miss South Carolina Volunteer, I talked about we are laying the groundwork. We're kind of following a blueprint to build from the ground up. And
Mhm.
so I would be excited to build relationships across the country, within the organization, with our sponsors, with our partners. I just want to get to know people. I want to talk to people. I want to
Mm.
hear their stories. I feel like that's the best way to build an organization is by talking and gabbing and chit-chatting. And I want to, uh, my girls' mentorship group that I run at my school, I have a 2 years curriculum set up. So I want to
Wow.
put that in the hands of more programs so that they can set up similar programs at their school. It's ready to go. All you have to do is do it. So those are my biggest goals. Should I be Miss Volunteer America? Just relationships and empower more young girls to be successful.
Exciting to be involved in the building phase and not in the phase where everything has been around for so long that you just have to keep doing it that way because that's the way it's always been done. So
Yeah.
I completely understand where you're coming from. Well, Maddie, just before we get to the final 10 questions, is there anyone that you'd like to say thank you to or give a shout out to for supporting you along your journey?
Well, thank you for having me, first and foremost.
Of course.
I love doing stuff like this. Shout out to my dads, because they're the best. My dad and my stepdad, Greg, are the reason that I can do pageants. They are the pocketbook. They're the pushers to make sure that I do what I'm supposed to do instead of being lazy. They really push me to be everything that I can be. My family in general, my sister is amazing and she deals with all of it even though she doesn't want to. And the whole Miss Volunteer America organization because they made me fall in love with pageants again. So,
Perfect. All right. Well, let's zip through these final 10. Number one, this will be an interesting one for you. What is your favorite word?
oh, I have to keep it appropriate.
Yes, that would be
Probably,
beneficial.
um, I like drats. I say that or y'all. I've started saying like as a substitute, I'll be like, "Oh, drats," and it's just so funny because it sounds like a move like something a movie character would say. And y'all, I feel like y'all is such a great multi-use word, and I encourage anyone who's not from the South to start incorporating it into their vocabulary because it's just so good, and you can use it in so many different situations.
I've tried using y'all, and every time I use it, I feel like such an imposter. I feel like it's cultural appropriation. It doesn't come out of my mouth properly. It just sounds so bad. I think it's funny you mentioned being appropriate because I've had a few pageant girls stay with me, and obviously in interviews I'm very appropriate, but I'm Australian. Like we have a lot of four-letter words. We even have songs about them. And she thought it was so funny. She was so shocked at first when, away from the camera, I was swearing. She's like, "Oh, I didn't know you spoke like that." It's like, yeah, I normally speak like that. What you see here is quite different. I will try to use y'all, but it doesn't. You need to say it with a certain attitude, and I can't do it yet. I
You
will
just got to
try.
commit to it, and then you'll find yourself just using it a little bit more often. And before you know it, you'll have said it and not even thought about it.
One can only hope. Well, number two, what is your least favorite word?
Ooh, can't. I tell my students all the time, it's not can't, I can't, or I cannot do it yet. You always, if you use can't, it always needs to have a yet after it because there's nothing you can't do.
That's funny because I used to tell my students the exact same thing. I just made it worse. I said, if you tell me that you can't do something, then you have to run a lap around the court, then you come back and we'll continue the conversation. And it got to the point where they would catch themselves and they would just start running. I was like, I was, very happy inside. It was like a giant win. But it was the whole, I can't do it yet. They would catch
Yeah,
themselves. So I absolutely agree with
very
that.
Pavlovian of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it worked for the dogs. Number three, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
I love, we talked about this already, learning new things. Anytime I can learn something, especially history related, but just in general. I also love like doing adrenaline related things. I've been skydiving twice. I love doing things that are just like get my heart pumping. I think that's why I like competing in pageants because it's like, oh, the adrenaline, the excitement.
Well, that was what turns you on. What about what turns you off?
Nasty, rude, hateful, negative people. Stay away. Get I don't want it. If you're going to be hateful, if you're going to be rude, if you're going to talk down about somebody, goodbye.
What sound or noise do you love?
Um, Children's laughter at any time and like not just like ha 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 like belly laughter. Anytime you can make a child laugh and they just have that like wholesome, wholehearted belly laughter, I feel like that's one of the most pure and wholesome sounds in the world.
What sound or noise do you hate?
All the typical ones like nails on a chalkboard, all of the ones that just ugh. This is not, so this is going to be really weird. This is kind of like synesthesia where you kind of associate touch with different senses. This is not a sound, but in my brain it's a sound. When you run your fingers over bricks, I hate that sensation and it doesn't sound like anything, but my brain puts it in the same category as nails on a chalkboard. So that's the same thing, I guess.
Okay. That's an interesting one. I quite like the feel of rough bricks. Obviously,
Yeah, I can't do it.
okay, to each their own. If you could have any superpower, what would you pick and why?
I would want to teleport because being able to teleport would add so many more hours to my day. I, it would be the most useful thing in the world if I was 3 hours away from an event and I could wake up an hour before instead of 4 hours before. It would just make everything in my life so much easier. I truthfully do not think that there is a better superpower out there than being able to teleport.
I would agree with that one. I think it's funny. Some people answer that question because it's like from an adrenaline or adventure point of view, like, oh, flying would feel so incredible. And then there are people who have a very practical mindset, like, oh, teleport so I can go to more appearances. It's very practical. But
Because
that
if I
would be
could
very
fly, my
cool.
hair would be everywhere and like my makeup would be messed up, my eyes would be watering. No, not
Yeah,
practical.
true. The crown would come off, your sash would come off. Yeah, it's not
Exactly.
practical for a pageant queen. Number eight, what job other than your own would you most like to attempt?
Um, I would love to be a travel blogger where you get to travel places and then you write about them, you talk about like where you stayed, all of those things. My grandpa was a flight attendant and he loved it. And I think there's a lot of negatives to being a flight attendant, but getting to travel the world is like ideal with very low stakes.
What job would you definitely not like to attempt?
I don't, I'm very girly girl and I don't like to get dirty. So anything that involves dirt or having to do manual labor, I'm much more cerebral than I am physical. And so I would excel in any job that requires like sitting in front of a keyboard or thinking or planning. Anything that involves me having to do something, I'm out. I'm not your girl. I joke that if a zombie apocalypse happened, you do not want me in your group because I do not have the life skills necessary to survive in a zombie apocalypse.
Right.
I Jeopardy trivia team, I'm your
Yeah.
girl. Zombie apocalypse, just let me lay there.
Okay. So you're going to be the first one to die in the zombie apocalypse. We're going to eat you first.
I'd ask you to sacrifice me. Like,
Okay.
please give me to the zombies so you can get away.
We'll use
Because
you as a
I'm,
distraction so we can run away. All right, that
yeah,
sounds good. So we're not going to
yep,
find you working in the sewers then.
mm-mm.
Have you heard
Nope,
of
nope,
fat? Have you heard of fatbergs?
no.
So just quickly, down in the sewage, because you can imagine how much congealed fat is in all the stuff that we eat under most metropolitan cities. And the drains, as big as they are, get clogged up with congealed fat because there's that much in there. And everything gets stuck in there from rats to tampons. And there are people who have to go under there to clear
Ooh,
that out.
absolutely
So
not.
we're not doing. Okay.
Bugs,
Can I
dirt,
interest you?
bugs, dirt, pushing things, having to work equipment. Nope, nope, can't do it.
Okay, fair enough. I
What
just
is
wanted
that
to
quote
double
from the
check.
White Lotus? Like, I don't think I'm meant to live an uncomfortable life. That's me,
That's
unfortunately.
fair enough. Final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Um, you did well. I am constantly seeking, unfortunately, much to my detriment, constantly seeking validation. And I'm just one of those people, like, I want to do a good job and I want to do well. And I want I want God to be proud of me. And I want God to tell me that I lived in his image and I lived like someone who is a Christian who believes in him should live. Um, so that I would want him to say that I did well.
Perfect. Well, Maddie, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on. I guess I'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it, sooner rather than later.
I can get out of this pouring cold weather and hopefully get some good Tennessean warmth into me. But
Get your shorts out, your flip flops, your sunnies, all the things.
can I though? See, I feel like I have to dress relatively nicely because it's a pageant. That's the thing. And then I was thinking, hang on, if I wear suits when it's 100 degrees out, that's probably not going to go so well. So I'm kind of
That's like
stuck.
in the daytime, you can have your shorts, you can hang out by the hotel pool. And then at nighttime, you can do this, the old switcheroo. The Carl Perkins Civic Center is freezing, so the suit might be an okay choice.
Good to know. Okay, all right. I will do that then. Shorts and the pool by daytime and then full on suit at nighttime.
Might
That
make your
sounds like a
suitcase
plan.
heavier though, but with all the outfit changes, but it'll be worth it.
Fair enough. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we will speak to you next time. Bye.